Leafs converts, hockey world, what is up? This is the Leafs Convo podcast. My name is Norman James. We have a fresh episode ready to go just for you. Mike Augello is where the Leafs play right now. He wants to break down what's going to happen between the Leafs and the Wings as they wrap up the preseason. The regular season is like days away. I cannot wait for it. Who's going to be on the roster when the puck drops on the brand new, fresh season that we believe the Leafs are going to be among the contenders to take all in? Mike and I will talk about it. Plus, one of those Leafs defensemen, I believe is an extra guy and potentially at the end of the line with this organization, is apparently on the trade market. How's that going to affect what's going on for him and for what the Maple Leafs have planned? Mike's ready to go. I'm ready to go. I know you're ready to go. So what do you say? Let's pod. The Leafs Convo starts right now. And here he is, our good friend, the one and only Mike Augello. How are you, sir?
Good afternoon, Norman. I'm fine. Getting ready for the last two games of preseason, and then we get to the real stuff.
So, Michael, the Leafs coming off a 5-3 win in Montreal. It was a bit of pond hockey from the Leafs' perspective. One thing I want to see, no matter what's going on with the defense or who's in net, and whenever, I just love that Leafs power play. I mean, that is why we watch hockey, and on the flip side, that is why these guys play hockey, right?
Well, it's loaded. It really is loaded, and Mike Babcock. I asked John Tavares and Mike Babcock today about the power play, and there's a ton of talent on there. You have 330 goal scorers in Matthews, Tavares, and Kadri. You have the Leafs leading scorer last season in Mitch Marner, and you have Morgan Riley as the quarterback. So it's a really great first power play, but it does pose some problems, and it's not something that is lost on Mike Babcock, because if you keep that power play out there for 1 minute and 30 seconds, say, for example, your top three centers are out there, and then you put out the second power play, which right now, I believe it was on Wednesday, it was Levo, Janssen, Ennis, Marlowe, and Gardner. It's not enough time for your three centers to sort of catch their breath, and your fourth line has to come out after the power play. And other teams will know that immediately and put their top line out there. So it could cause some vulnerability on the part of the Leafs. And that's why I think Mike Babcock is sort of hedging his bets right now. He loves the talent that's on there, but they have to sort of score and score quickly for them to continue to use that lineup. Otherwise, I think you open yourself up for counterattack.
This is weird. We are not condemning, but we are concerned about the Leafs power play being too good when it's stacked too much, even though this team has a lot of depth.
Well, look at the balance last year of the power plays. The number 2 unit was Marlowe, Matthews, Nylander, Gardner, and at times it was Komarov until he went to a fourth line role, and then it was Andreas Janssen. There was a balance there. The top unit, obviously, there's no more Tyler Bozak and no more JVR, so you've had to move people in there. It's the question of having three centers. If you balance the power plays, if you had one of those three on the second power play, then by the time the power play is over, one of the guys who's on the first power play could play at a regular shift. It just poses a problem that Par Lindholm could be the fourth line center on this team, a guy who's played no NHL games and could go up against Patrice Bergeron or Jack Eichel or somebody in their division, and goals cost games. And that's a situation that's not lost on Mike Babcock. It could open themselves up to counterattack. So I think they'll play around with it, and he says he's going to play around with the lineup and a few other things and see how it works. But if the power play doesn't produce like it did last year, which was 25%, it was second in the NHL. If it's not that good and they open themselves up to that potential counterattack, then you could see the power play change.
Well, the talent on this team is not spread out unevenly. There's plenty of it, and you have to feel like the parts are interchangeable. And your top line, if a fourth line is up against it, and the challenges that it can present, that the top line will be able to overcome it. If you have a fourth line out there facing the top line of another team, clearly the Leafs will be at a disadvantage in that moment. However, it's not like the fourth line on this team is a bunch of guys coming out of Senior A. I mean, you're expecting these players on a team that aspires to win a championship to be up to the challenge of taking on the elite from the Leafs opposition. So I want to see interchangeable parts. I want to see a balance, especially with a team that has so much talent, literally right throughout the roster. The thing is, we're talking about the power play and how much fun it is to watch them dominate and abuse the opposition. But the Leafs scored 2 shorthanded goals in Montreal the other night. I mean, that's an indicator that Montreal has some issues, and they're going to have issues. But it's also nice and fun to watch when you have that talent killing penalties, putting themselves in a position to score those shorties.
Yeah, Marner and Kapanen score within 20 seconds of each other, and that pretty much put the game away. Although it wasn't out of the reach of anybody, being down 4-2. But the concern also is they gave up 2 power play goals, and I know one of and remember, this is the lineup that was is closely resembling the lineup that you're going to expect to see next Wednesday against the Canadiens. And on the first power play goal, Par Lindholm sort of was running around, and you had the defensive pairing of Hainsey and Zaitsev that were sort of out to lunch. They were just sort of, soft and didn't really understand, I think, what they were doing, and that's a concern. Now, it is a preseason game, and obviously these players are not playing at full bore, so I'm going to reserve judgment until what happens in the regular season. But they need the penalty killing to be as good or better as it was last year. And one of the concerns again is Ron Hainsey playing full 2 minutes and Zaitsev being that top pairing on the penalty kill.
The last few days of the preseason, we're less than a week away from the start of the regular season. We're so excited. How close are we to seeing the finalization of this roster?
The cuts should come down. And remember, they're at 43 men right now. So they could cut in 2 segments. I think they might do that simply because, players that everybody knows are going down to the Marlies, like, Jeremy Bracco and Adam Brooks, they'll cut them first. And guys who they may want to keep that they think waiting to the 11th hour to put them on waivers when teams have already sort of, decided on their roster, they might wait until the absolute last minute, which I think would be Monday, because players who have to clear waivers, it's a 24-hour process. So I'm of the opinion right now that Curtis McElhinney is the backup goaltender. He will get the start tomorrow in Detroit. It's going to be basically the same situation as Sparks last Monday against Montreal, where it was basically the Marlies playing in front of them, and it's going to basically be the Grand Rapids Griffins playing for the Red Wings. So it's going to be essentially be an AHL game with a couple of bubble players out there. But he's outplayed Sparks, and I think Sparks is probably going to be either traded or there's some sort of injury, or they keep 3 goaltenders, which is possible, but Dubas has said he's not really going to do that, or they put him on waivers and pray. So I think that's going to be the situation.
This is the Leafs Convo podcast. Norman James in London, Mike Augello, right in the heart of it all, downtown Toronto. We have some big news potentially to break regarding this podcast. Tell your friends about what we're doing. The Leafs Convo podcast is rocking and rolling. Some of the recent stuff we have done, and your conversation with Bill Waters the other day was fantastic. People say what they want to say about Bill Waters. He's a vault of knowledge, and it's a privilege to have him share, his thoughts about the game and unfurl a lot of that knowledge through the Leafs Convo avenue. So please pass that along to him when you do. But, you and I have spoken about some of these bubble guys on the Maple Leafs roster, Garrett Sparks, Josh Levo, of course, Connor Carrick. And now I'm reading through some hockey insiders, some of those in the know that, Connor Carrick is potentially trade bait. I put out an item for the Leafs Convo a couple of days ago that basically suggested that Sparks, Levo, and Carrick have run their course with the organization. They've pretty much done all they can. Am I accurate in that belief?
Well, I mean, you may very well be correct, but the thing is right now, I mean, with Sparks, as I mentioned, I think McElhinney's outplayed him. I know for a fact, speaking with an NHL scout, that if Sparks would be placed on waivers, that there's at least one team that would be interested in claiming him, but that might be based on how they thought he played in the Calder Cup, and after seeing a couple games of him playing in the preseason, maybe they would change their mind. Or there were some other goaltenders like Al Montoya that got placed on waivers today, and Michael Hutchinson got placed on waivers a couple days ago and cleared. So it's not a fait accompli that he's claimed, but I think that right now, there could be a little bit of chicanery that Kyle Dubas can do, legal chicanery that they can do to, not have to go through that. With Levo, I think he's played well. He hasn't really stood out in terms of scoring goals, but Babcock seems to be generally pleased, but he seems to be stuck in that extra forward situation where he could be the 13th or 14th forward. But if Nylander, all of a sudden signs, I think Levo is the extra guy. He's the odd man out. He's not beating out Tyler Ennis. He's not beating out Andreas Janssen. And he's not beating out Kasperi Kapanen. So I don't know where he plays. And as for Connor Carrick, David Pagnotta of the fourth period, who's very well connected, is saying that the Leafs are actively shopping Carrick. Now that, he hasn't had a bad camp, but he really hasn't stood out. And for somebody who's been around for a couple of years, I think they expected him to stand out. And I think this is also a factor of Igor Ozaganov, stealing the number 6 job. So they want size on the bottom pairing. I think Ozaganov will probably end up being like one of their 4 penalty killing defensemen. And Babcock likes him and likes what he's seen of him. So, Carrick is maybe a 7th defenseman, or if they're trying to trade him, maybe he's a guy that they put on waivers and maybe won't get claimed because he's making $1.3 million.
Hence the reason why I labeled Connor Carrick, and you can extend that label to Josh Levo and Garrett Sparks, as extra guys. They're extra guys. And in a lot of ways, they're at the end of the line with this organization. And they should want that to be the case, especially if they are extra guys. Send me somewhere where I can go and make a difference. And we've even gone on about Garrett Sparks being given the opportunity to go elsewhere and become the starting goaltender, or the impact goaltender in the NHL that he aspires to be. I don't want him as my backup for any extended period of time in Toronto. I'm not ready to have that, a guy with a lot of talent, but not as mature as you probably want, or experienced as you probably want him to be in that role. So it just doesn't make sense for him to go back to the AHL and toil away when he believes he's an NHL goaltender. Connor Carrick, great guy, steady hand, but he's just not in the picture, right? As a guy who's going to be an impact defenseman, even as a part of the third pairing. And Josh Levo, you just explained it as well. So, these guys have been fan favorites, and this is where now we begin to, take our love for Leafs players and have it supplanted by our love for the Leafs and the love for a team that aspires to win a championship and has a real opportunity to. What else do you have to add to the Leafs Convo? I know you've got a busy night ahead of you, a busy weekend, and then we count down the minutes until puck drop.
The only thing that I see in terms of the last games here is the defensive battle. And Calle Rosen, I thought, had a great game against Buffalo last Saturday, but then I thought he didn't play very well against Montreal on Wednesday. And every time somebody moves forward, they take a step back. So Mike Babcock really has to find a guy who has the least amount of negatives. And that sometimes is a tough thing to do.
Hey, Mike, thanks for your wisdom. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, Norman.
That's a wrap for this edition of the Leafs Convo. Whether you listen to us through a traditional podcast platform or our YouTube channel, thank you so much for all of your support. For Mike Augello, I'm Norman James. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.